Okay, so we're on page 105. Okay, we're going through this material. It's very difficult material. Some of the most difficult in all of halacha. We're doing the laws of b'dikos, how to do an internal examination, when you do it, they have siktara. And eventually it leads to the Shiva Nekiyim, that after the period ends, we'll try to define when that exactly happens. You have to start counting 7 clean days. Because remember, we assume that people could be a Zava Gedola, not just a Nida. Mina Torah, once a woman was bleeding, let's say, and she bled for 6 days. Then on the 7th day, she was clean. And she did a hefsek tara at that time of the Torah, and found herself clean. She could go to the mikveh that night and live with her husband. But we don't follow that halacha. We follow the halacha that bleeding that she saw could have been that she was a zava, which requires 7 clean days before you can cohabit with your husband. And therefore, you need zayin nikiyim. So once a clean hefsek, so let's go further in 105. Once you have a clean hefsek tara, it means she checks herself, we said, before Beina Shmoshois, and she's clean. You can then count Shiva Nikim, 7 clean days, the next day. So Monday evening, before evening, she checks herself, she's clean. So Tuesday is going to be her first clean day. And she has to count 7 clean days. The basis for a woman who's in need of counting Shiva Nikim stands from the Torah's requirement for a Zava to count Shiva Nikim, right? Because it says, V'im tahara mizova, v'safra la shivas yomim v'achar titar. The din of zayin Nikim is by Zava. A Nida doesn't need that. But we assume that all of our women who are Nidos could be Zavos. So they're treated as Zavos. On a Torah level, a woman who is a Nida need not wait 7 clean days, but may simply wait 7 days and ensure that she is clean by the end, as we discussed in the first shiur in this volume. However, Chazal instituted the practice of Shiva Nikim for all women with the status of Nida due to the concern that they might also unknowingly have the status of Zav. According to the Chochmas Adam, he was the Chaye Adam, Rav Danzig, lived 1700s. The fact that the Shiva Nikim for a Nida is based upon a biblical concern that perhaps she is a Zava and is required to count Shiva Nikim on a Deraisa level has a practical consequence. In his opinion, a woman who is unsure of which day her Shiva Nikim began and how many days she has counted must be machmir on herself. She must be stringent and count the maximum number of days that she may not yet have counted. He bases this ruling upon the principle of Safek Deraisa L'Chumra, an uncertainty related to a biblical rule must be treated stringently. So if it's a suffix, let's say she lost count. I think I counted 3 clean days, but maybe it's only 2. So then she'd have to count another 5, according to Chochmas Adam, because the suffix, we'd have to go further. Yes, Jerry?
No, you just answered it.
Says the Chochmas Adam, Im Tasa b'minyan hayamim v'lo yada kamaim, az lina l'chum yadav v'savek d'oraisa. You always have to go stringent. If she b'chlal doesn't remember at all, she has to count 7 clean days. Now, how many bedikos does she have to check herself every day of the 7 clean days? A woman counting Shiva Nikim is obligated to perform bedikos during that time to ensure that she does not bleed anymore. But it's not clear how many bedikos she must perform. The Mishnah Nida records a 3-way machlokas tanoim concerning one who only performed the bedika on the 1st and 7th day. Let's say a woman checked herself internally on the 1st day, and she does it again on the last day. Is that enough? Or what about the intervening days? Well, if the first day she was clean and the last day she was clean, that might be enough or not. The first opinion holds that these 2 bedikos are sufficient. The second holds that only the days on which the bedikos took place count, meaning she checked herself for 2 days. We don't care about the other 5 days that she didn't check. They didn't check. So she has to count 5 more days. The third holds that only the last day counts. as bedikos must be formed every day. Think about it. Let's say she checked herself on the first day, but let's say if she would have checked herself on the second day or third day, she had blood there. So you got to negate the first, and the only real count is the seventh day. So that's the three were machlokas. Let's see the Gemara.
Well, if she examined herself on the first day,
Yes.
and then she examines herself on the
On the
last day,
Yes.
we've got to assume that it's so
So
clean.
the Tanakama agrees,
Yeah.
but then another opinion held that she checked herself 2 different days. It's counted as 2 days of counting, but she has to do 5 more days because we don't know what the status was on those 5 days that she didn't do Badika. She might have bled if she checked herself. The last opinion is even more machmir. We only count that 7th day as a check, like I explained. Because the first day, remember, if she saw blood on the 2nd or 3rd or 4th day, that wipes, you got to start again new. So it wipes away the fact that on the first day she was clean. That's why that last opinion is the most machmir. The Mishnah Nida says like this: Azava Azava, Shabbat Kuatzman B'Yom Rishon Umatzu Tor. They checked themselves on the first day and they were clean. Ulayom Hashvi, and checked on the 7th day, Umatzu Tor. Ushar Yomim Shebentayim Lo Badku, and she didn't check day 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Rabbi Yezer Oimer Harehein Becheskas Tahara. It's as if she counted 7 clean days, and she can go on with her life as a Tohor person on the 8th day.
But she didn't have relationship.
There's no relation
between the first and the 7th.
Of course
day.
not. You got to have 7 clean days before you have relations.
Right. What I'm saying is that she didn't have relationship between the first and the 7th day.
Absolutely not.
So let's assume that she wasn't clean. Oh no, she no. So, which means that she was clean. I mean, that means there was nothing wrong with this.
Clean. She has to check herself internally with a bedika cloth. If she found blood on day 2 or day 3, it would have wiped away day 1.
Mm-hmm.
These are cases where she didn't check herself, only on the 1st and 7th day. Rabbi Yeshua Omer Ein Lahem Ela Yom Rishon V'Yom Shvi Bilvad. Rabbi Yeshua says, you know what? She checked herself for 2 days. She gets those 2 days, but she's got to count. She's got to check 5 more days. Rabbi Kiva Omer Ein Lahem Ela Yom Shvi Bilvad. He says, no, only the 7th day counts for her. She has to count 6 more clean days. And the Gemara rules, in accordance with Rabbi Yezer, that even bedikos performed only on the 1st and 7th day suffice for the entire 7-day period. According to Rabbi Yezer, it is assumed that if she was clean on the 1st and 7th day, then the interim days were also clean.
Right. But we don't hold like that.
We'll see. We'll see. V'tanya, Rabbi Shimon Rav Yossi Oimrim, Nirin div Rabbi Yezer b'div Rabbi Yoshua, v'div Rabbi Akiva div Kulan, aval halacha like Rabbi Yezer. The halacha is like the most lenient posting. Now, what about la halacha? What's the number of bedikos required lachatchila? According to Tosfos, Rabbi Yezer's allowance for bedikos on day 1 and day 7 alone applies only in a b'diavad situation. It means it's not lachatchila that we should rely on that. If later on she came to the Rav and this is what had happened, okay, we'll say that she's Torah, but lachatchila, we should not manage ourselves this way. Ideally, one should form a bedika on every day of the Shiva Nikiya.
Yeah, according to Rav Lezer, a person only has to do is check the first day and the last day and forget the other 65 days.
Correct. And that's how the Gemara paskin. But Tosfos explains to us that the sheet of Rabbi Yezer is not a lechatchila din. A lechatchila means this is the way you're supposed to do it. It's only an after the fact din. For example, she comes to the Rav after the fact. This had to do with Tumah v'Tahara. The part we have to understand is the dinim of a Zav and a Zava didn't just apply to whether they could have relations with their husbands. It had to do with things that they touched became Tameh. So let's say on day 8 or day 9, she had touched $1,000 worth of bread and there's about to be a wedding. Okay? And then they come to the Rav, and the Rav interviews her and says, I only checked myself on day 1 and day 7. So Bidi Eved, after the fact, because there's extraneous circumstances, they'll say, okay, she was Tohor Bidi Eved because she was clean. We'll follow Rabbi Eliezer because we'll accept that she was clean, and therefore we don't passel those $1,000 worth of bread. Bidi Eved. But lechatchila, if she had come to the Rav and said, what would we have advised her? You got to check every day. And even Rabbi Eliezer would hold of that. That's how Tosfos. So we have to understand, the Gemara was closed in year 400. Okay? Then there was a 600-year gap. And we learned this Gemara. So Rabbi Eliezer said this thing about 1 and 7. Tosfos had Rabbonim going all the way back. And Rashi, the same thing. How did Rashi know what to write? Rashi lived in the year 1000. 500 years later. Well, they learned from their Rabbanim. Their Rabbanim learned from their Rabbanim to explain what did the Gemara really mean. So to say that 1 and 7 is enough for relations, no. It's only b'di'evet in an after-the-fact case regarding Tumah V'Tahara, but not necessarily regarding living with the husband.
When the Mishnah says Cheskas Tahara, I mean, he's basing it on the first day, right? You know, the Chazaka doesn't, where's the Chazaka fit in here?
Eliezer Omer Harein b'Cheskas Tahara. Well,
just from what, from the first day?
The Cheskas Tahara exists for Rabbi Eliezer only after the 7th day of Bedika, because you need Shiva Nekiyim to make her b'Cheskas Tahara.
So where's the Chazaka fit in? 1st and 7th, you don't have a Chazaka even. You don't have 3 days.
No, there's no Chazaka yet. Chazaka is established after the Bedika of the 7th day.
If anything, she has a Chazaka of Tumah.
Of Tumah. I agree with you 1,000%. Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. If she had touched something, if the Rav was passing on a Shaila on things that she checked on day 3 and day 4, in Chanami, they would be Tomei. We're talking about she touched something on day 8 after checking only 1 and 7. So there, Tosfos is explaining that Rabbi Eliezer says, but she's b'cheskas tahara b'di'eved. That just explains the b'di'eved nature of it, that it's after the fact. But l'chatchila, if she had come to the Rav, they would have said, no, you got to check every day. Mm-hmm. Let's see Tosfos inside. Rabbi Eliezer oimer harei b'cheskas tahara. Mikan mashma isha shesofer shiva nekiyim. A woman who counted Zayin Nekim, who vodka Yom Rishon Yom Shvi, checked herself only day 1 and day 7. Who matzatar the choshev sfira, it's considered a count. Rak Shabbat katzma Yom Shapaska Bola Erev. As long as she checked herself the day, she did a proper hefsek tahara. The day before, when she stopped bleeding, as long as she did a good hefsek tahara before evening, vivsik b'tahara. Here comes the kicker. But lechatchila, she's got to check every day herself. Although it seems clear from Tosfos that one must ideally perform a bedika every day of Shiva Nekiyim, Tosfos do not specify how many bedikas should be performed. Does she need every day? The Beis Yosef cites some Rishonim, such as the Ramban, Rashba, and the Rosh, who hold that one daily bedika is sufficient. She has to do it every day, but only once. While other Rishonim, such as the Smag and the Smak, hold that one must ideally perform 2 bedikos daily. So this is the Beis Yosef in your day at Kuf Tzadik Vav on the tour. Every day of this Zayin Nekim, she's got to check herself with a bedika cloth at least once a day. Kain Kosfu Aramban, Arashba, the Harosh. These are the major Rishonim, right? The Lechatchila Miyat Tzrichalasos came. Kain Kosfu Agois Mamoniyos, the commentary on the Rambam, B'Shema Tosfos, who quotes the Divrei Maskil Rabbi Eliezer. Umi Kosfu Stam Tivdok B'Chol Yom Mashma Lechatchila Tzrich Livdok Yoser Mipam Achas B'Yom. Right? The Tosfos we just learned tonight, where it says Utzricha Livdok B'Chol Yom, it's mashma that once is enough. Uma Shekosav Rabbeinu, that which the Tur wrote. Shebesefer HaMitzvahs Kosav Pamayim. Kenu Besefer Mitzvahs Gadol, that you got to do it 2 times. and so is it reading in the Smag. Sefer Mitzvahs Gadol was a early compilation of halachas, and Sefer Mitzvahs Ketanos, that's the Smak, the Sefer HaTruma of Mordechai, other major Rishonim, B'Shem HaRokech, Sheboidekas Pamayim B'Chol Yom Mimei HaSfira. That this opinion holds that during these 7 clean days, she's got to check herself twice a day. Pamachas b'shachris, in the morning when she wakes up. Upamachas kisholechas lavis, towards the night. Venerally, shalom duken meditnan prepared kama denida pamayim tzrichim lios bodeka shachris ubein hashmoshes. Okay, the question is, how did the Shulchan Aruch paskin? The Shulchan Aruch rules in accordance with the more stringent position that a woman must perform b'dikos twice a day lechatchila. B'chol yom mishiva simat sfira tzricha lios bodekas lechatchila pamayim b'chol yom achas shachris v'achas samuch lebein hashmoshes. Most contemporary poskim accept the position of the Shulchan Aruch, requiring 2 daily b'dikos in standard cases where no leniency are needed. But Rav Mordechai Willig, posik in Yeshiva University, holds that due to concern for irritation caused by multiple b'dikos, one should perform only 1 b'dika daily during the Shiva Nikiyim, even lechatchila. Says Rav Willig, the position of the Shulchan Aruch that requires 2 daily b'dikos lechatchila is based on the Mordechai. It is evident that he is referencing a different social reality in which women were mostly found at home and had additional assistance in raising children. Thus, they were able to perform additional b'dikos in an unpressured environment. In the contemporary setting, however, women are more likely to be found outside the house or in other less conducive situations, and the risk of irritation from a pressurized b'dika is greater. Accordingly, the standard of 1 daily b'dika, in accordance with the Tur and other Rishonim, is appropriate even lechatchila. Okay, so we see modern halacha in action.
Running around, everything.
Well, why is it that the Torah agrees, that Willig agrees with the Torah? What did the
No,
Torah say?
No. We said the
What
beginning
was
part.
the reason
The
once
Beis
was
Yosef,
enough?
it said, the Tur said, "V'chol shiva simei hatzfira tzircha lios bodekas lechatchila pamachas b'yom." Kain kosvu haRamban v'haRashba v'haRosh. So there were many Rishonim, powerful ones, who learned from the Tosfos, where it said utzricha livdok b'chol yom. Doesn't mean you have to check twice a day. They held it was enough once a day. So Rabbi Willig, citing the
Right.
social concerns today, says you have someone to rely on, that 1 b'dika is enough. Look, Jerry, we just learned tonight that the Tanoim held that b'dika on the first day and the 7th day is enough. You didn't have to do any b'dikas day 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. It's only the chatchila we should do it, but the evidence works. Yeah, so where Rabbi Willig is coming from, yes, you should do a b'dik every day, but once a day is enough. He got it from the Tosfos and the various Rishonim who agreed with that.
But he's giving a reason why you
Why you can get away with only once a day.
once a day. So what was the thought of the ones that said also once a day, like the Rambam, stuff like that? Why did they
No,
think
we
once a day is
said
sufficient?
the
Because of
Ramban, the
what
Rashba, the
Willig
Rosh
was
said
saying?
lechatchila. Where the
Are they
sword?
afraid there might be bruises or
No,
something that they
no,
might come?
it doesn't say. Tosfos said, "Umi lechatchila tzricha livdok b'chol yom." If the Tosfos wanted you to check more than once a day, he would have used different language. He just said you have to check every day of the 7 days. From that language, they're learning once a day is enough.
But Willig is giving an answer. Willig is
Willig,
saying,
no, the Shulchan Aruch actually paskins that we should do it twice a day.
yes.
But the Rabbi Willig is going back to the Tur. The Tur preceded the Shulchan Aruch. The Tur was the son of the Rosh.
Right.
He wrote the first codification of Even Ezer and Orach Chaim. That was created by the Tur. The Beis Yosef is Rav Yosef Karo. He was the main commentator on the Tur. 150 years later, in Tzfat, the Rav Yosef Karo wrote the Shulchan Aruch, where he codified his own halacha. So he disagreed with the tour. He noted that the tour held you only need to do it once a day. He brought other Rishonim that said twice a day, and he passed in halacha that you need to do two twice a day. Rav Willig is going back to the tour. It's not usual. Usually we with the Shulchan Aruch, but because the tour, the Beis Yosef himself mentioned the other Rishonim who allowed one bedika a day, Rabbi Willig has somebody to stand on to make that psak.
And which time during the day would be best, morning or evening? I don't talk about that.
I don't see what Rabbi Willig says. I think most people do it
Morning?
before the Ben Hashmoshes period.
Okay.
It could be based on convenience. If it's less pressure, and they're very worried that multiple bedikos are going to cause bleeding and irritation, and they don't want that. They want wives to be available to their husbands. So that's part of this as well. So it may be that it's related to the woman's schedule. That if Ben Hashmoshes is too hectic because the kids come home from school and this and that, and early in the morning she's alone and there's less pressure, it probably would suffice to do it early in the morning. Now, we mentioned the number of dikos required b'di'evet. We mentioned above that according to the Gemara, the halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer that bedikos performed on the first and seventh day of the Shiva Nekim suffice to give her a presumption, a chazak of no longer bleeding. However, the Gemara needed discusses the possibility that perhaps Rabbi Eliezer required only one bedika during the Shiva Nekim at minimum, meaning not once in 7. So iboiluhu, we asked the question. Azov Shabbat Atzmam Yom Rishon the Yom Shmini. So she checked herself on day 1 and day 8. Well, day 8 is out of the Shiva Nekim. So it's really only a one day of Bedika. And she found herself Torah on the day 8. Ushar Yamim Loy Bodkun. She didn't check herself. Rabbi Eliezer Ma'u. Now, what would Rabbi Eliezer say? Do we say Tchilos from the Soifan Be'inon? You need listen, at a minimum, you need the beginning of the Zayin Nekim and the end of the Zayin Nekim. And V'hacha Tchilos Eka Soifan Leka. Here you only had the first day, you didn't have the 7th day. O Dilma Tchilos Afagav Shein Soifan. Maybe you only need the beginning and you don't need the end. Omer Rav, he, Tchilasan Afal Pisha Ein Soifan. Rav says that that's enough. The 1 day count, even though it was the first day, even though you don't have the end count. Rav Chanina Omar, Tchilasan V'Soifan, but you need first and 7th. Hacha Tchilasan Eka Soifan Leka. So according to Rav, it seems that one who performs a bedika on either the first or 7th day has fulfilled their obligation minimally. According to Rav Chanina, on the other hand, bedikas are required on both the first and 7th day. Rishonim dispute which opinion is followed according to the practical halacha. According to the Rambam and Rashba, a bedika on the first day suffices, at least when another one is done before she immerses, even if it is after the 7th day is over. Meaning, 7th day comes to an end. It's now nightfall. It's now after Tzeis HaKoichavim. Now she goes to the mikveh. Well, before she goes to the mikveh, she has to check herself, according to this shita. They'll allow the 1 day. See, we're going from stringency to leniency. That really, lechatchila, she needs to check every day. We said before that the one leniency might be if she tells us, well, I checked myself on the 1st and 7th day. Well, that we might rely on because Rabbi Eliezer relied on that b'di'evet. Even Tosfos says you can rely on that b'di'evet. Now we're trying to extend it to even 1 day. Let's say the first day of the Zayin Nekim, she checked herself. And she didn't check herself day 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7. Then she's going to go to the mikveh that night, the night of the 8th. Before she goes, she does a bedika. She's clean. According to the Rambam and the Rashba, it's okay. Even if it's after, because, while according to the Smag and Sefer Truma, the halacha follows Rav Chanina, that bedikos are required on day 1 and day 7, and it wouldn't work for Zayin Nekim, for this woman. The Shulchan Aruch, in the continuation of the Seif quoted above, cites this dispute. The first opinion holds that one time is sufficient. The Shulchan Aruch appears to hold that according to Rav, only one B'dika is sufficient, while the Rambam appears to hold that a second is necessary, though it may be on the 8th day as opposed to the 7th. Concerning why, according to the Shulchan Aruch, the Mishnah would present a case of B'dikos performed on day 1 and day 7, when Rabbi Eliezer does not actually require both, he gives you another source. But while the second opinion holds that even B'di'eved, B'dikos are required on both the 1st and 7th days, she will not get away with that scenario. It will not be considered that she counted Zayin Nikiyim. Says the Shulchan Aruch, Im lo badka b'chol hashiva ela pam achas. Let's say she only checked herself once during the Zayin Nikiyim.
Right, it could be the 5th day or.
Lo shana badka b'yom rishon shel hashiva b'yom hashvi. Ol be'echad me'amtsoim. He's saying maybe she checked herself on day 1, maybe she checked herself, say, on day 7, or maybe on day 4. Doesn't make a difference. Remember, we have another B'dika. That was the B'dika of the Hefsek Tahara. Before the Zayin Nikim started, on the day before, right, before Bein Hashmoshois, she checked herself and she was also clean. Let's not forget that that was a clean check as well. The Shulchan Aruch Pon side. Alula, the one-time check in the Zayin Nikim period, says the Shulchan Aruch, is okay. Avalim lo badka b'chol hashiva. But if she didn't check herself at all during the 7 days, she only checked herself the night of the 8th, Yom Hashmini badka, u'matzatara ein lo el Yom Shmini bilvad. She only has that day, and she's got to count 7 u'mashalemas 11. She has to complete it. She's got to count 6 more days. The Shulchan Aruch ends up with a Yesh Omrim, which is the sheet of the Smag in the Sefer HaTruma. We know that she's got to check herself at least day 1 and day 7, and you can't be lenient. Since the Shulchan Aruch appears to favor the second opinion by writing one must not be lenient, it is generally accepted as the practical halacha in nearly all the cases. Machon Pua in the Sefer Pua strongly recommends, based on rulings of Rav Shlomo Zalman and Rav Shmuel Vosner, that even one who was permitted by a halachic authority to suffice with 2 bedikos during the Shiva Nikiyim, right? Let's say one of the poskim took today tells a woman that if you check yourself twice, like maybe once in one day and day 1 and day 7, that's enough, should try to perform an additional bdika during one of the interim days in case she forgets on the 1st or 7th day or stains on the 7th day and is afraid to perform a b'dika. This way, she will not lose their entire Shiva Naki, but only a portion of it. Says the Sefer Pua, b'mikra sheisha miskasha litar levaila. Here we're talking about women that have problems with staining. They have problems having kosher relations with their husbands. And it's very hard for them to be clean. It's an emergency. There is a mitzvah of pru'ervu and shalom bayis, and that's a shasat chag. And therefore, you can be lenient in how many b'dikas. Okay. Any other comments? So Abe asked, what's the proper time? The Ramah writes that the B'dika cloth should ideally be examined during the day in sunlight, which is strong. One can see natural colors. But B'diavad, you can use candlelight. With regard to performing the actual B'dika at night, it is generally accepted that such a B'dika is invalid, though the basis for this and the possible reasons for leniency are beyond the scope of this shiur. Even with candlelight, you can check it. Rav Shmuel Vosner writes in the Shevet HaLevi that in simple cases where the appearance of the stain is quite clear, the cloth may be inspected at night. She didn't do the inspection at night. She did the inspection, let's say, before Bein Hashmoshois, but she only checked it at night. ובשאלות רגילות, כשרואים שאין שום שאלה וניכר גם בלילה, if it's very apparent what the color it is, אפשר לראות גם לאור הנר, אבל בסופק יש לבדוק לרעיון. You should check in the sunlight if there's any suffix. So when do the Shiva Nikiyim begin? So far in this year, we've discussed some of the rules relating to Hefsek Tara, right, which is the final check before she starts counting the 7 clean days, and the Shiva Nikiyim. What is left to discuss, and is somewhat more complex to understand, if everything we've learned so far is not complex yet, is the question of how many days a woman must wait after the onset of the menstrual cycle before beginning Shiva Nikiyim. So different women bleed for different number of days. Some women bleed for 5 days all the time. Some women bleed during their period. Some women bleed for 2 days and then they stop. Some women bleed for 3 days and they stop. So is there a minimum number of days that she has to wait before she can do a Hefsek Tahara, find herself clean, and start the Zayin Nikiyim? That's the sugya we're about to learn. We have already seen that she must obtain a clean Hefsek Tahara on the day before beginning Shiva Nikiyim. What is the earliest possible time that this can be done and the Shiva Nikiyim can be begun? The answer is that she may start counting Shiva Nikiyim at whatever point it can be ensured that she will not subsequently become impure as a result of poletet shichva zera, discharging semen remaining from relations prior to becoming a nida. So let's say,
She's a nida.
hang on. We're talking about a woman who starts bleeding, let's say Monday, right? On Sunday, she didn't have her menstrual period. So she and her husband were having relations. So Sunday night, they have relations. And then Monday morning, she starts bleeding. So there is an issue that the semen that's inside of her, if it comes out, it conveys tumah. So the question is, how long is that semen viable? And therefore, is it for 2 days? Is it for 3 days? So we're not even, the beginning of the Nikiyim can only start after we're through with that issue of the possibility. Now, we don't even know if they had relations, but we assume that they do. Halacha assumes that that is occurring, okay? So this is evident from a series of sugyot in the Gemara Nida. The Gemara states that a zav, that's a man who experiences a seminal emission in the middle of his Shiva Nikiyim, must interrupt his count. So you have as a man had a seminal emission. We're not talking about regular ejaculation. Zivus was something different. It had a certain color and it was diagnosed, whatever. Maybe it was a urethral discharge that like a man with gonorrhea has. We don't know exactly what the zivus is. But if a man saw this discharge like 2 days or 3 days, 2 or 3 times on the same day, he became a zav. And then he has to start counting 7 clean days. For him, he had to bring korbanos on the 8th day. Until then, everything he touches is tummy. Now, he's counting, first day I'm clean, second day I'm clean, third day I'm clean. On the 4th day, he sees a seminal emission. That's a regular seminal emission, like Shechva Zera, okay? That breaks the count of the clean days. And now he has to start a new clean day. So we see from here that Shechva Zera alone, which is semen, is metame. The Gemara later in the Masechta cites Rami Bar Chama, who questions whether the same halacha applies to a zava as well. So let's see Masechta Nida. Zos Toras Hazav asher teitzenu mimenu shechva zera. Ma ziva soseres av shechva zera nami soiser. When a male zav is counting 7 clean days, and he gets to day 3 or day 4, and all of a sudden he sees real zivus, then of course it breaks his count. But the Gemara here is telling us no, that on day 3 or 4, even if he sees a seminal emission, it breaks his count. Then in Masechta Nida Lamed Gimel, Boy Rami Bar Chama, Poileta Shechva Zera Mao shetistor beziva. You have a woman. Now, a woman becomes a zava in a different mechanism. She doesn't have semen. Remember, a woman becomes a zava if, remember, we have, a woman has 7 days of Yemei Nida, followed by 11 days of Yemei Zivus. If during those 11 days of Yemei Zivus she saw blood 3 consecutive days, she becomes a Zava Gadol and has to count Zayin Nikiyim. Now, we're talking about a woman who's a Zava Gadol, and she's counting Zayin clean days. And on day 3 or day 4, semen comes out of her. Roya Haisa V'Soiseres? Is it that it's like she saw emission. Now, a man, also when he has an emission, he sees it, yet it breaks it. It breaks the count. Roya Haisa V'Soiseres, Odilma Noigas Haisa V'Loisosra. Now, semen, if it touches something, can also make something tameh, but it does not break your count. For example, let's say a woman counting Zayin clean days, a dead sheretz falls on her. That doesn't count, that doesn't stop her counting of clean days. Similarly, if semen touch, so the question is, if she drops some seminal fluid out of her vagina during that period of time, is it viewed as a viewing, or is it viewed that the semen touches her? And in that case, maybe it wouldn't break her count. So the Gemara doesn't resolve Rami Bar Chama's question, but a number of Rishonim note that the Gemara later in Nida does appear to rule that if she has Shechva Zera coming outside of her, it breaks her clean count. We see that from Boim Minei Rav Shmuel Bar Bistam Abai Poileta Shechva Zera Roya Avya Nagas Avya. Is it considered that she had a viewing, or that she was touched by something tummy? Amarle Roya Havya. It's a viewing. Also, Charlotte Rava, they asked Rava, Amarle Roya Havya. It's a viewing. Also, Rav Yosef Amarle Roya. So all 3 Amiroim paskin that if she had happened to have seminal fluid inside of her and it came out of her and she saw it, that would actually break her count. So if it's accepted that Poleta Shechva Zera, discharging semen, does force her to interrupt her count, we must then determine for how many days experiencing such a discharge is a relevant concern. The answer to this can be found in the Gemara in Shabbos, which cites a machlokas concerning how many days or 12-hour periods, which are called onod, can semen remain potent following marital relations, after which point it would no longer render her impure. So Masechta Shabbos Ton Rabbanon, Poileta Shechva Zera B'Yom HaShlishi, if someone discharges Shechva Zera on the 3rd day of her count, she remains Tahira, because Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah is going to hold that after 3 days, or in the 3rd day already, because it went by 2 days, the semen doesn't have any potency. I'll give you the answer. Sometimes it's after 4 12-hour periods. Sometimes it's after 5 12-hour periods. Sometimes it's after 6 12-hour periods. It's always after 5 12-hour periods. For example, if she had relations after part of the 1st period passed, she's given part of the 6th period to complete the requisite 5 12-hour periods, so 60 hours will have gone by. The say you need 3 days, 6 complete 12-hour periods, which is 3 days. The Rambam rules that semen remains potent for 3 onos or 12-hour periods, which the Beis Yosef explains follows the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah. The Rambam also rules that a woman who discharges semen within that period must negate that day of her count. Harambam's also, this is the Beis Yosef on the tour. Harambam's also the Poleta Shechva Zera Soiseres Afla Baila, that she won't be able to have relations with her husband because it'll break the Zayin Nikim. Sharei Kosav Perek Shishi Milchos Yisrei Bia. Polta Sheikh Vazer B'Tochim Asfira. If semen comes out of her during her count, so Iseres Yom Echad, it will break one clean day. Midnei Shehi Kazav Shiro Keri, like a Zav who saw seven emission Shesoiser Yom Echad. Umir Soiver Zal She'en Klita Sheikh Vazer Soiseres. Ela Kishanif that doesn't break one day, only Kishaniflas Tok Sholosh Oinos, unless it happened within 3 12-hour periods. Aval Kishanifla Dachar Sholosh Oinos, Enos says it doesn't ruin her count if the semen came out of her after 3 12-hour periods. Shekasav Per Chamish Milchos Shar V'Satuma Ha'isha Shepota Sheikh Vazer Impota Oisa B'Soch Sholosh Oinos. If the semen had come out within the first 3 12-hour periods, Harehi Tmeya Karoya Keri, she becomes impure like a man who sees seminal emission. And lefichach soiseres yom echad, it breaks one day of the count. Im haisazavav im polta achar shal shones. If the semen came out after 3 12-hour periods, harei aisha tahira, the woman remains tahor. V'chein shechva zer sheniflata tahira, and that shechva zera that comes out at that period of time is also tahor. Sharei nifsada tzurasa, it lost its form. The time of Neshut Poisek Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, says the says the Beis Yosef was explaining. He's holding like the Rabbi Elazar in the Gemara. The Isra Perek Rabbi Akiva, below Kamosh Pirish Rashi Sham Dvarov. Ela Kamosh Pirish Rambam Matzma Perek Shmini Masechos Mikvos. The Kosuv B'Truma Sadesh and the Orzer Gadol Nami Poisek Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. The Poileta Shech Vazer B'Yom Shlishi Tohira, that if she loses seminal emission from herself on the 3rd day, she remains tor. Even if there are only 2 12-hour periods complete, like Rashi explained, we need 6 12-hour periods, which is 3 days. The Rosh, the father of the tour, rules in accordance with the opinion of the Chachamim that the semen remains potent for a full 3-day period following relations. A woman could therefore become impure during that time and interrupt her count of Shiva Nakim if she would begin beforehand. For this reason, she does not begin her Shiva Nakim until after a full 3-day period. The Rosh explains that she should therefore wait at least 4 days from the onset of the menstrual period before beginning the count to ensure that the 72-hour period is passed in all snares. Practically, that means, gentlemen, if a woman bled for only 2 days and then stops bleeding, so she cannot start her count, she cannot do a hefsek tahara until the 4th day. You got it? Because the first 3 days, some semen could have come out, which because of the relations she had before she became a nida. So you can't really start the Zayin Nikiyim until after 4 days, according to the Rosh. Hilkach. Yesh lahachmir b'poiletas v'soiseres yom echad. We have to be stringent in the woman who might discharge semen, which would break one of her days. Hilkach kol isha tzrich lizor shelo tavke lispor shiva nekim ad yom chamishi shelishimusha. Her zayin nekim should only, her first count should be the 5th day. Means she has to do the hefsek tahara on the 4th day, right? She can only start the zayin nekim after the hefsek tahara. She can't do it on day 3 because she might have semen there. So she, at a minimum, she's gonna be considered like a nida for at least 4 days, and then she can only do the hefsek tahara, right, on the 4th day. Maybe she'll be clean, and then she can start counting on the 5th day. Kigon, im shimusha b'motzei Shabbos. Let's say she had relations Saturday night. Eina metchila lispor shiva nekim ela b'yom chamishi. She can only start on Thursday. The kaimel and M'Rabanan. So let's see. Because let's say she became a nida Monday, so she has to count Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Wednesday is the Yom Chamishi, which is she does the Hefsek Tara then, and she starts her first clean day on the 5th. If Wednesday night she might have seminal emission, it still would be viable. Koidim ate shimusha b'motzei Shabbos because of the relation she had Saturday night. Adaini omedes b'toch sheish shonos shimusha. She's within the 3 days. V'impalta soiseres, right? If it's going to break hilkach yom chamishi, rishon l'sfirasa. The Ravid zal kosav b'tshuva shaloi onru poileta shechvazer shezeseres l'taras pilvad. The Ravid said, all of this has nothing to do with having relations with your husband. This only had something to do with touching things that become tamei. However, Nachon lachmer kedivrei Rabbi Yehuda. I'm not sure who the Re is here. V'cheinogim b'Tzarfat uva Ashkenaz. Yeah, the Re. So we're machmir. In the Rosh's scenario, the couple had relations Motzei Shabbos at 11 p.m. The woman began her menstrual period Sunday morning, and then discharged semen on Tuesday night at 10 p.m. Since this is within the 72 hours of Saturday night, since the time of the relations, the woman would become impure and need to invalidate that day of the counting, right, Tuesday night, Wednesday, to prevent this from happening. She begins counting Shiva Nikim on Thursday, the 5th day after.
Oh, I'm confused. This relations here, this seminal emission. If a woman has relations
With her husband, and that seminal emission comes out, that's matame her.
the seminal
for
emission
only for
often will come out. 90% of the time, something will come out. No,
But here's the
it's always going. She's always going to be every time she has relations.
that's
The
what-
next day she can't have relations with him again.
no. She can't have relations again, but the Sunday morning she starts bleeding.
Okay, she starts bleeding. That's the
So
important
now,
thing.
and then let's say she stops bleeding Monday.
But then she sees it. She can't do right.
So from blood only, she might be able to count Nikiim Tuesday.
Right.
But this law of the seminal emission prevents her from, because she might
I see.
drop semen
I see.
Monday, Tuesday
Right.
night.
Right.
So that wipes Wednesday
Right.
out. Wednesday, she can do a hefsek tahara. It's
Right.
beyond 72 hours. If she's
Right.
clean, she can already start Thursday. So now we understand why there's at a minimum, she can't do the hefsek tahara until day 4. And that way 4 days. Now we're going to see, we Ashkenazim, that's only for Svardim. We Ashkenazim follow 5 days. We don't start counting until after. We assume that all of our women, when they were nidos, it was a minimum of 5 days. We'll see why. Now we understand why. This is going to be the shita adopted by the Shulchan Aruch. Let's see if we can get there. The Beis Yosef concludes that the halacha follows this opinion, that one must wait a full 72 hours from the time of having relations, since that's the position taken by the majority of the Rishonim. It's not just like the Ravid said that it's only for touching tamei foods. This has to do with her permission for her husband. We have to go like the Chachamim for 3 complete days. V'chein ra'iti lemori harav kovid malas harav Rabbi Yaakov Beirav. Zechor l'chai olam haba. Dorish barabim, Rabbi Yaakov Beirav, his teacher, darshaned like this publicly. The Trumas Hadeshen takes a more stringent position that the Shiva Nikim should begin a day later than according to the opinion of the Rosh. The reason is that if the count is allowed to begin after 6 Onod, it is possible that one will have relations Sunday during Bein HaShmoshes, during twilight, and assume it is still daytime, which means that the count begins on Thursday, just to have had relations Motzei Shabbos and then become a nida. But perhaps in reality, it's not Bein HaShmoshes. Remember, twilight is Safek Yom, Safek Laila. So it would push it off really to Monday. So we push it off another day because of that problem. But perhaps it was already nighttime, in which case if the woman experienced a discharge on Wednesday night, within 72 hours of the active relation, she would invalidate the counting that day. Therefore, she must wait until Friday to begin counting, even when bleeding begins on Motzei Shabbos. That's the shita of the Ramah. And why Ashkenazim are more machmir regarding this. The Tzurba M'Rabanan also writes that to prevent confusion, one should not distinguish between which day the couple had relations. Rather, even if they engaged in relations a few days before a menstrual period, she must wait the prescribed amount of time beginning from her bleeding. This serves as a gzeira. It's a precautionary measure because the case where she had relations before and on that day, people aren't going to remember, I did have relations on that day, I didn't have relations on that day. So we make it like a low plug. We do it in all cases. Says the Tzurba M'Rabanan. B'rov HaChiburim, in most writings, the Isha Sheshim Shem Baila V'rasa Bo Bayom, a woman had relations, Lo Tatchil Lispor Shivnikim Ad Yom Chamishi L'Shimusha, that she should start cutting on day 5, Mishum D'Sheish Ono Shlemus Be'in L'Flita Shechlazer. V'Shamati, the Yesh Lo Sifod, you can't start on day 5, you have to start on day 6. The Yesh Lo Sif, that means the 5 days she has to be completely Tomei. V'lo Tatchil Lispor Ad Yom Shishi L'Shimusha. She has to only count on the 6th day. If you permit her to start counting on the 5th day, because 3 days went by, and you're going to say because the semen is not viable, maybe they had relations in that gray period, but we don't know whether it's day or night. She thinks it was daytime. It was nighttime. And now comes the kicker. The we don't care when she had relations. Lo plug rabbanon. The chachamim the gazrinon. Lo shimsha to shimsha. Whether they had relations, didn't have relations, we don't start counting from when they had relations. V'nira devada yesh lachmir kerid b'shel Torah halach achara machmir. Since these are Torah laws, we should be machmir v'koshken b'ser kores. This is kores v'churmas yiseres nogin b'nosra b'lachos nida. The Beis Yosef rejects this excessive stringency. Kosav b'Tzurba M'Rabanan the yesh lo sif od yom echad. You have to add another day. You have to only count on the 6th day. Like we said, maybe they had relations in this great period. When he's quoting him. That's what the Tzurba M'Rabanan said. Says the Beis Yosef, Rav Yosef Karo, and he says these are stringencies. Velem smach b'Gemara, and he has no source from the Gemara. It's not the minig. The minig is to wait 4 days. It's only if she had relations. If no relations, we don't do that gzeira. So based on his conclusion of Beis Yosef, let's learn the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah tonight before we leave. He rules in the Shulchan Aruch that one must wait 72 hours before beginning the Shiva Nekiyim, which practically means that one must wait 4 full days based on the Rosh. If it's within 3 days, so if she had relations and then it became a nida, upaska and stopped, says the Ramava filu lo rasa rak matza kesem. Even if she found a stain, meaning without hargasha, she cannot count 7 clean days. The semen might come out. She has to wait 3 complete days. She has to only count 5 days from when she had relations. Kagon, he gives the example of Shabbos, the night of the Saturday night. The semen doesn't have effect after 72 hours. If she had relations with Motzei Shabbos, if she's dropping semen the night of Wednesday night, then Adaini Omeres b'toch Chodesh Shishi, she's still within the 72 hours. It would break her count. Hilkach Yom Chamishi Yom Rishon, she can only start counting on the 5th day. However, the Ramah, who we Ashkenazim follow, is machmir like the Tzurba M'Rabanan on both points. It means it has nothing to do whether you have relations. It's a gzera no matter what, and we don't start counting until the 6th day. Tifsok Yom Revi Leis Erev. Let's say she did her Hefsek Tahara Wednesday before nightfall. The Yom Chamishi Ola Laminyan Shiva. And on the 5th day, she can start counting. However, Yesh Kosfu Yesh Lamtin Od Yom Echad. The Ramah is referencing the Tzurba M'Rabanan, the Hainu. Shlo Tatchil Linos Ad Yom HaShishi V'hu Yom Yorishon L'Sfiros the Cheshin Shemet Tishabesh B'Yom Rishon. Ben Hashmon were concerned that maybe she had relations during that Ben Hashmoshes period. The Tizbor Shu Yom, V'Efshe Shu Laila. She thought it was day, it could be night. In Tatchil Linos B'Yom HaChamishi, she had talked, she might be within that 72-hour period. Al Ken Yesh Lo Sif Od Yom Echad. He's quoting the Tzurba M'Rabanan. The Me'ati Yefshel Lavoli Day Tos. The Ramah says, this is how our minig is, we should not change. The Yesha Kosfu, that's the Tzurba M'Rabanan as well. We don't make a difference whether she had relations or not. V'chol Isha Sharoya, a woman who sees blood, even just a spot, without Hargosha, she has to wait 5 days from the day she saw the blood. V'tifsok le'etz erev. She has to do a hefsek tahara towards nightfall. V'tisfor shiva nekiyim. V'chenohagim dis elevein l'shanos. So 5 days, including the day she sees. According to both the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah, a woman only waits 4 or 5 days after seeing a flow of blood that indicates the onset of her menstrual period. But she not need wait 5 additional days if she sees a problematic stain or sees blood on her bedika cloth in the middle of Shiva Nekiyim, in which case she must restart her 7-day count, as no matter. We don't start again 5 more days, meaning
7 days?
Here's the summary. The woman sees a spot of blood. So that's like having a period, even without Hargosha.
Right. She waits.
So now she has to, it's as if she treats herself that she's bled at a minimum for 5 days.
Right.
Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Then Thursday towards evening, she has to do a hefsek tahara. And then Friday, she starts counting clean days.
Right.
Day 6 from the last time when she saw blood.
Okay.
Now, let's say on Wednesday, she saw a spot of blood. She doesn't have to do 5 days again and then 7. She just has to count Zion. She has to wait until she's clean and then count Zion clean days. Let's say she saw a spot of blood Wednesday. Remember, during this Zion Nekiyim, she's checking herself. Well, she
doesn't have to wait after the second day.
She doesn't have to do the 5 days plus 7.
Right.
She only
goes through the whole time the 7 days.
We're talking about, let's say
But
the
on the
Chiddush.
5th day that she sees it.
No, we're talking about, let's say she saw on Sunday, and then she starts counting. She has to say at least 5 days.
Right.
Now, then let's say she starts counting Zion Nekiyim on Friday. So she's counting, I'm clean today, I'm clean the 2nd day, I'm clean the 3rd day. Now on the 4th day, she does a bedika and she finds blood. We don't make her wait another 5 days and then 7. She just has to get 7 clean days taken care of. That's the shot. Avalim tochim es firosa, or acha chamisha yam nizkakla v'chaz rasa damo kesem poisekes poisiyam betahara umoin lamachmas. She has to be clean the next day. She can count as a clean day if she's clean in the 2 bedikas. Zeh pashu. Okay, so difficult sugya. Any questions, comments? Well, we're basically finished with the bedikos. The next week, we're going to start learning how does a man and a woman during the Nida period, do they have to stay away from each other? Can they eat on the same table? Do they have to have different placemats? The harchakos. Can you drink from the same glass? How do men and women during the Nida period have to treat themselves? That's the beginning. That's what we're going to learn next week.
Okay.
Okay, everybody, have a good vach.
Thank you very much.